The Raiders might be naming their next head football coach a little bit sooner than originally expected. That plus more on Monday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for January 20th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome here, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you, whether you're catching us wherever you find your favorite podcast or you're checking us out on the YouTube page. You know, we appreciate that. The show continues to grow each and every day, and that's because of your support, Raider Nation, and because of the job that my man Ari does behind the scenes on the YouTube page. Without him, there is no YouTube page. So big ups to my man Ari. Does a great job each and every day. You can check him out, shout him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, you know, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. An action-packed show for you on today, on this Monday, on this Martin Luther King Day. Your calls and texts will close out the show, right? We got a lot of feedback that we want to get to, try to get as many calls and texts in when it comes to the head coach, when it comes to the organization, and just what's been going on while NFL action is still going on as the divisional round of the playoffs got wrapped up this weekend. So we'll close things out in segment number 3 with your calls and texts. Segment number 2, we'll take a look at another potential GM that the Raiders are bringing in and have talked with and is going to talk to again in Chad Alexander from the Chargers. He is the assistant GM. He's been around the league for a very long time, spent some time in the Baltimore Ravens organization, and again has a lot of respect around the league. So we'll continue to do our series that we're working on, Get to Know the Potential GM. We'll do that, getting to find out about Chad Alexander as Joe Reedy from the AP. I had an opportunity to catch up with him on my radio show. You'll hear what he has to say about Chad Alexander. Here in segment number 1, we'll talk about the news and notes of the day, really what I gathered over the weekend as it pertains to the Raiders, not only head coaching search, but also their GM search. So we'll jump into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. And before we get into the news and the notes, I do want to make sure I go ahead and shout out my son, Kimani, who passed away on this day in 2020. I talk about him, very open and honest about Kimani and his passing here on the podcast, and it's something that I'm going to continue to do. But yeah, this day is never one of those that is fun. It's never one of those days that, you know, celebrate or call anniversaries, because I feel like that's something that, you know, is a celebratory type thing. But it's also something I'm not going to shy away from. And, you know, it just kind of cracks me up. Normally I would do pretty much a whole segment on them. But since there's so much to get to, I don't want to take away from what the Raiders have going on with their search. But I guarantee right now that boy, and I know him so well, he'd be calling me. I was like, hold on. Dad, is this what's going on? What's going on with the coaching search? Like, it don't matter who told him. Like, the Raiders, like Mark Davis could go to him and be like, hey, Kimani, this is what we're going to do with the coaching search. He'd be like, hold on, man. Hold on. Dad, is this true? Like he's that guy that always has to, you know, he always would have to, you know, like confirm everything with me. It didn't matter who told him what or his friends told him something. He'd be like, man, you don't know what you're talking about, man. My dad knows. Let me call my dad real quick. He's so funny. So I guarantee with the Raiders going through their coaching search and their GM search, it wouldn't matter who told him what. He'd be like, man, hold on. I ain't believing nothing until I call my dad. Dad, is this true? Is this what you're hearing? Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. Okay. All right. Yeah. You know what? That's good. My dad told me. He was so funny, and he was always that guy. He was very much like me, where he was very loud. He was very, you know, just can capture a room. He was just that dude. So we definitely want to shout him out. I will never, like I said, not shout him out. Don't shy away from him passing away. A car accident back in 2020, and obviously it's something that you never want to be able to get that phone call. You always want your kids to bury you, not you bury them. But sometimes that's not in the cards, and that's not how it plays out. But we definitely keep his spirit alive here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So, Kimani made it to 20 years old, never made it past. But, we definitely, like I said, show him that love today. Now, let me get into, it's funny, with that being said, it's an easy segue because, again, the Raiders are looking for their next head football coach, and it looks like by the results of what we saw all over the weekend, they may be naming their head football coach a little bit sooner than expected, as the Detroit Lions lost. The Washington Commanders knocked them off on Saturday night. It was something that was a shock. Side note, shout out to Antonio Pierce, who not only wanted the Raiders to draft Jaden Daniels, but he also wanted Cliff Kingsbury as the offensive coordinator. Obviously, it didn't happen. The Raiders couldn't get from 13 to number 2 to go get Jaden Daniels, and Cliff Kingsbury pulled out as the OC when he couldn't get an extra year and pretty much knew that the Raiders weren't going to get a quarterback. So I know Antonio Pierce and his 1 year with the Raiders as the head football coach, nothing worked out the way he wanted it to. He clearly was on to something, though, because Jaden Daniels, the Washington Commanders, and Cliff Kingsbury are now basically playing for an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl, as they're going to be headed to Philadelphia next weekend to take on the Eagles. And if they knock off the Eagles, they'll be playing in New Orleans in the Super Bowl in Jaden Daniels' rookie year, which is incredible. But with that being said, with Washington knocking off the Detroit Lions, now Ben Johnson, the hotshot OC, and Aaron Glenn, their defensive coordinator, are both available, right? A lot of people expected them to be playing in New Orleans, be playing on February 9th in the Super Bowl, and so they wouldn't be able to officially be hired until then. But now that they've lost, now that their season has gotten wrapped up, well, everything changes quite a bit. Matter of fact, here's Adam Schefter from ESPN. He was on Sunday before the first divisional round playoff game, talking about what's going to happen. What's the domino effect now that Ben Johnson and the Lions have lost?
Well, you know why Tom Brady's involved right now? Because whenever the Raiders hire their next general manager and their next head coach, they at that time will be paying 3 different general managers. They will be paying 3 different head coaches. And that doesn't include the settlement that it had with John Gruden. So in a way, it's really paying 4 head coaches and 3 GMs whenever it makes its new hire. And whoever comes in there has an enormous challenge on his hands. And that's why Brady's there. Because if he weren't there, the job would not be as attractive. It's awfully compelling, I think, when you're thinking of joining a franchise to know that Tom Brady is in it with you. And he's going to try to do everything he can to help you. Because if you are Ben Johnson, and we just talked about Ben Johnson passing up Washington, you pass up Washington and you could wind up taking the Raiders job. As we mentioned, Ben Johnson's going to be a head coach. Ben Johnson has earned that right. But if he takes the Raiders job, he's now going to a division where the head coaches are Andy Reid, Sean Payton, and Jim Harbaugh, and the quarterbacks are Patrick Mahomes, Bo Nix, and Justin Herbert. And you're going to a team that doesn't even have a quarterback, doesn't have a draft pick to go land a quarterback, and has to find a way somehow to get a quarterback. So good luck with that. Like, again, Ben Johnson needs to take one of these jobs, and he's going to take one of these jobs. But can you imagine bypassing Jaden Daniels last year and then taking the Raiders job over that? Because Tom Brady is the I get it. Tom is incredible. He's impressive. But the Raiders have so much ground to make up right now, especially in that division. And that, to me, is what they have to overcome here. Now, somebody's going to take that GM job happily, and somebody's going to take that head coaching job happily. But the challenge that they have, to me, is greater than the challenge that almost any team in this hiring cycle has, because of the level of competition that you're facing in the AFC West. It's like the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Russell Wilson's a free agent. Justin Fields is a free agent. Russell Wilson very well may be back. That would make a lot of sense. But you're now going into a division where the other quarterbacks are Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and the Cleveland Browns with the number 2 overall pick, thinking they're going to take a quarterback. So that's what Pittsburgh's trying to overcome. The Raiders have it even tougher, in my mind. But they're going to be doing it with a lot of dead weight on their cap. And that's why Brady is there, because they're paying all these former GMs and they're paying all these former head coaches. And fortunately, that doesn't count against their cap. But boy, that shows you the number of mistakes that they've made and the lack of stability and patience that they've had, to where now they're back in this market again. And hopefully they get it right and they get the right guys. And we're not talking about the Raiders making another change and having a 4th head coach and 4th GM on their payroll.
Well, and it certainly makes sense, because when all this stuff started coming out, and you would know more than just about anybody, Shefty, but I don't think Ben Johnson even takes an interview with the Raiders if Brady's not there.
Agree.
You know,
agree. Agree.
If he's going to turn down Washington, and now granted, Washington, different situation, new owners, they didn't have Jaden Daniels in place and everything, obviously. So, but like you mentioned, you look at that Raiders, I mean, there's holes everywhere. And to think that they're going to be able to compete next year and have a Commanders like jump in that division doesn't seem sensible. But again, if you have Tom Brady, this is exactly why you get Tom Brady.
Ty, I don't mean to be a pessimist. I'm going to try to be a real. I don't believe that is possible. I just don't believe it. Jaden Daniels is one of these generational quarterbacks. You're not finding that guy in the draft this year, and you don't even have the draft pick to do it.
So everything gets sped up. So the Raiders technically, as we've all talked about quite a bit, Ben Johnson is the leader in the clubhouse. They want to name him their head football coach. Now, if he chooses to accept that job is one thing, right? There's other suitors, just like you heard Adam Schefter say, it's going to be the Raiders, it's going to be the Jaguars, it's going to be the Bears, and I'm not saying anything is signed, sealed, and delivered until it is. Right, because anything could happen. But the Raiders technically could name Ben Johnson their head coach this week, right? Or if they wanted to go with Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator for the Lions, they could name him this week. I don't think that they will, but they could with Ben Johnson. I think that they're going to put the full court press on him now that, he's available, and they're going to try to get it wrapped up sooner rather than later. And, he took an interview with them by Zoom. He didn't have an in-person interview. He doesn't have to technically have an in-person interview to get the job. He could still come to an agreement before being actually in person. So all of a sudden, things have gotten sped up quite a bit when it comes to the head coaching search for the Raiders, and I do expect them to, come to a conclusion, come to the decision sometime this week. Again, Ben Johnson from the Lions, the OC, Aaron Glenn from the Lions, the DC, Steve Spagnuolo from the Chiefs, the defensive coordinator there, Pete Carroll, former Seahawks head football coach, Vance Joseph, the defensive coordinator for the Broncos, Ron Rivera. He visited with the Raiders on Friday. Robert Saleh, former head coach of the Jets and defensive coordinator of the 49ers. He met with the Raiders over the weekend as well. So those are all guys that they've talked to for their head coaching spot. And Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator from the Baltimore Ravens, he is available for the Raiders to talk to if they want to do that as well. And the Baltimore Ravens lost over the weekend. So now he's available. If they want to bring him in, they could. And they could hire him right on the spot because the Baltimore Ravens and their season has gotten wrapped up. So I think that the head coach is going to be named pretty quickly, and I think that we'll find out some news about that front coming up this week. As far as the open GM spots, the Raiders were very active on that front. On Sunday, as a matter of fact, they interviewed GM, or assistant GM, I should say, Lance Newmark for the open GM spot for the Raiders. And if that Lance Newmark name is familiar to you, it's the one that I've talked about quite a bit, who is coming from the Commanders but has familiarity with Ben Johnson. Matter of fact, this came from Adam Schefter. He said the Raiders are interviewing former Lions executive and current Commanders assistant GM Lance Newmark on Sunday for their general manager job. Newmark spent 26 seasons in Detroit before joining Washington last year and is said to have a strong relationship with both Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. So you connect the dots, right? Ben Johnson, that's always been one that's been talked about, that if he's going to get a head coaching job, he's going to want to work with a guy he's very familiar with in Lance Newmark. So the Raiders are checking that box. They brought him in on Sunday. I don't know how that interview went, but obviously they got him in the building, and that's one way that they could try to persuade Ben Johnson to take the head coaching job. Also, they could be still going with John Spytek, right? He's a guy that's expected to be a leader in the clubhouse for their open GM job. He's a guy that's a current assistant GM in Tampa Bay, and a guy that Tom Brady knows really well, played with him at Michigan. So he's still considered to be the leader in the clubhouse. But if Ben Johnson chooses to say, hey, I need Lance Newmark here to be my GM, then I expect that Lance Newmark will be the GM of the Silver and Black. So things are moving along pretty quickly. As a matter of fact, here's Jonathan Jones from CBS Sports talking about what the Raiders are going to do, how active they're going to be this week.
So the Raiders, they're going to make a big push in the coming days to land Ben Johnson. Mark Davis ceded this to Tom Brady. He said, hey, I've done things one way, and now I have the GOAT. You got Brady, Davis, and 3 other billionaire part owners who have been doing these searches. Now, Brady has his eyes on John Spytek to be his GM, and some wonder if he'll go with someone familiar with Johnson at GM to make sure he lands the coach. Johnson's going to decide tonight and into tomorrow when and where he's going to interview.
So there's Jonathan Jones right there from CBS Sports talking about how hard they're going to really go after Ben Johnson now that he's available. Again, nothing is sealed yet. Nothing is set in stone. He could easily go to the Jaguars. He could easily go to the Bears. I do believe that the Raiders are the one that he's probably looking at the most, but it doesn't mean anything, right? The good thing about this now and the fact that Ben Johnson's available, if he does choose to go in another direction, like say he goes to the Jaguars and wants to be Trevor Lawrence's coach, or maybe he goes to the Bears and wants to be Caleb Williams' coach, The good thing is that the Raiders won't be caught out in the cold. And what I mean by that is if he decides to go somewhere else, say this week or even early next week, there'll still be other coaches available like Pete Carroll, like Steve Spagnuolo, like Vance Joseph, like Ron Rivera, like Robert Saleh. There'll still be other coaches that the Raiders have talked with that they could bring in. So it's not like they're just sitting there waiting for his season to get wrapped up. All these other guys get jobs, and then all of a sudden he's like, yeah, I don't want to go to the Raiders. I'm going to go to who knows, Chicago. Or no, I'm going to go back to Detroit because we didn't, finish what we wanted to get started or get done. Then all of a sudden the Raiders are stuck and they're scrambling. So I'm glad that it's happening right now. I think that's a positive for the Raiders because they'll find out one way or the other. Even if Ben Johnson doesn't choose the Raiders, at least they can go in plan B, plan C, plan D, whatever the case may be. They have options as opposed to, it's kind of like me when I do my Christmas shopping. I wait till the very last second so there's no options on the shelf. It's just like, all right, well, I guess that's what I'm getting. You know why? There ain't nothing else there. There ain't nothing else there, so it makes shopping easy. Well, when you're looking for a head coach, that's not what you want to do. You don't want to wait till the last second. You don't want to have any other options and just settle. So that, again, I think is a really good scenario when it comes to the silver and black. But Lance Newmark, Commanders assistant GM, met with the Raiders on Sunday. Chargers assistant GM Chad Alexander is actually going to be meeting with the Raiders in person today. He worked under Ozzie Newsome and was Joe Ortiz's first hire there in L.A. He's only been the Chargers assistant GM for 1 year. Also, today, the Raiders will interview Giants assistant GM Brandon Brown for their open GM position. His first interview with the team was conducted virtually. He's a fast-rising executive with a scouting and background, won a Super Bowl with the Eagles during the 2017 season. So the Raiders have a lot going, but everything now since the Lions have lost is fast-tracked to a major, major degree. So we should find out something sooner rather than later, which to me is very exciting to see what next direction, the next chapter of the silver and black. But we'll start to get to know somebody who could potentially be part of that next chapter, and that's Chad Alexander, current Chargers assistant GM, comes from that Ozzie Newsome tree, spent some time in Baltimore, and has some skins on the wall to talk about. My guy Joe Reedy from the AP actually joined my radio show last week and talked about him, so you'll hear that conversation coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a couple great sponsors here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, and the first one is LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, well, we all know that growing your small business in 2025 comes down to how well you can hire, right? And LinkedIn is going to help you do just that. With the strongest hiring data available, LinkedIn helps you identify the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the best decisions for your business. And a lot of folks have used LinkedIn Jobs, and they can tell you it is a game changer when it comes to hiring the right fit. Small businesses are wearing a lot of hats, so every hire is crucial. LinkedIn gets that. That's why they connect you with the best candidates using data you won't find anywhere else. From unique skills and interests to the connections you share, LinkedIn helps you find the right person for the job. In fact, 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn has helped them find quality candidates, and they helped them find it really quickly. Hire smarter this year and find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I also want to tell you about PrizePicks. And it's playoff time. It's getting down to the wire, right? You got to make the most out of the final few weeks of football action. That's where PrizePicks comes in. If you love football, want a chance to win some real money while watching the games, well, PrizePicks is the place for you. The best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. PrizePicks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns, and for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly. PrizePicks has got you covered. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people love the platform. So here's a real special offer for all Locked On Raider podcast listeners. Locked On NFL listeners too, but don't tell them, right? Better for you. Download the app today. Use the promo code Locked On NFL and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app. Use the promo code Locked On NFL. It's all one word to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to continue with our Get to Know the Raiders' Next Potential GM series that we got going on. I think it's been really good. If I acted like I knew every one of these front office guys, these assistant GMs or these scouts or these guys and tried to gas them up like this guy, that guy, or the other can do this, that, and the other, it's just, it wouldn't be real. It wouldn't be authentic, and I wouldn't really know who the Raiders are getting or what the Raiders are getting. So it's been great to be able to catch up with guys who do know who these assistants are, because they cover the team like a glove. Just like if someone were to call me and say, hey, Q, can you tell me about Champ Kelly? I could break him down, right? I could break it all down, tell him everything that a team would get in Champ Kelly, because I'm obviously around him, around the Raiders organization. So I know what he does on the day-to-day. But I don't know what a Chad Alexander from the Chargers, I don't know what he does. I know he's been with the Chargers for only a year, coming over with Jim Harbaugh and company as they turned everything over when Tom Telesco got fired, and obviously Brandon Staley as well. So on my radio show, Unnecessary Roughness on Raider Nation Radio 920, I had an opportunity to catch up with Joe Reedy from the AP and start off just asking him, hey, man, I know it's only been a year that Alexander joined the Chargers front office, but what can you tell us about him and his impact with LA in the 1 year that he's been there?
I think when you look at the front office and what they did this year, especially the not settling down the bottom of the roster, I think Chad said shortly after the draft and on a story on the team site when he got back from the league's accelerator program in December, he basically said to churn at the bottom of the roster is a never-ending process. And this front office was aggressive in not staying still. If they saw guys on the waiver wire or who got released or in a couple instances traded that they thought in the long run would do this team a lot of good and upgrade, they went and got it. I think you look at the moves that they made since training camp started, adding a Puna Ford, a Tierra Tard, trading for an Elijah Molden. Heck, Marcus May coming in on 3 days' notice after Thanksgiving and getting an interception in the Atlanta game. Eli Apple came in and, after a couple weeks on the practice squad, really didn't lose a step, and even, the move last week, getting Ezekiel Elliott for the practice squad. So it was very aggressive, and I think they were, Chad, Joe Ortiz, and that entire front office was very adept at pro scouting, and also with the limited amount of time that they had with the Charger scouts last year. They had a very good draft class with for the picks making immediate contributions.
When I look at this hire, the Chad Alexander hire there in L.A., from all my understandings and research is he was a big priority for Joe Ortiz. How important was it to get him in the mix as soon as possible? And if I'm correct, did he come from the Baltimore Ravens front office?
He was with him and Joe spent a lot of time in Baltimore, but the past 5 seasons before coming to the Chargers, he was with the Jets as director of player personnel. And Daniel Jeremiah worked as a scout in the Ravens front office too with Joe and Chad. So they go back a ways too. But when Joe Ortiz was hired at GM, without a doubt, he knew that the guy that he wanted as his right hand and his assistant GM was Chad Alexander, and they got it done very quickly. And he's been one of these guys that has had a long career in personnel in the league, has that Baltimore lineage with Ozzie Newsome and Eric DaCosta and George Kokinis working for all of those guys, and working for another Harbaugh too now with Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers after being working in that personnel department with John Harbaugh for many years. So they're very well versed and a well-rounded resume.
Joe Reedy from the AP is with us here on Raider Nation Radio 920 Unnecessary Roughness. Do you look at Chad Alexander as a guy that you feel like sooner rather than later he will be a GM of his own team?
Yeah, I think so. He's been one of these guys who has been mentioned in league circles for a while. Certainly being in the accelerator program last month certainly helps as far as get your name and reputation out there, and also, for people that get on that list, they certainly do get it. They certainly do get a lot of exposure, and I think there have been a couple times too out in LA here the past year or two. He's been part of that Ozzie Newsome GM training and symposium too. So he's certainly well-known pro personnel, college scouting too. So good interview and good experience for him.
How much, when you look at the player personnel and the way that this team is constructed there in L.A. with the Chargers, how much of that is this is what Jim Harbaugh, the head coach, wants, and this is him having a heavy say in what goes on, and how much is that the guys in the front office that are trying to construct this thing?
I think it works hand in hand. I think Joe Ortiz working for John Harbaugh and working with Jim Harbaugh coming back to the NFL and an experienced head coach, it helps in knowing that mindset and philosophy. But I think Jim realized a good front office and having a good relationship and a general manager that you trust and can work with, and no egos certainly helps too. Just looking at the situation and how things unraveled in San Francisco. And I think you kind of look at Jacksonville now and Trent Baalke's track record, and I think it's more the GM than the coach that caused a downturn in San Francisco and Jacksonville. But I'm not the one with billions of dollars making those decisions. But I think it's everybody worked together well. The assistant coaches and coordinators, are also have a hand in helping the scout and get the players that they want, and the mentality. I think bringing in a lot of former Ravens helped this past year in developing that physical mindset and the way that they want to play. And now for year two, it's building upon what they did. But I think, one thing that helps coming into an organization is having a quarterback. And the Chargers definitely had that with Justin Herbert. I think whoever becomes the Raiders GM and head coach, they've got to have the same mindset and kind of an outline who they want to be the quarterback, whether it's on the roster or whether they've got to go out and get one. But getting the quarterback position right is especially vital with this team and organization. I think, Tom Telesco had a good draft class. Mm-hmm. He didn't solve the quarterback position, and I think that's a big reason why Tom is no longer the GM at the moment.
Yeah, that's exactly where I wanted to go next. And again, we're talking with Joe Reedy from the AP, talking all things Chargers and their assistant GM, Chad Alexander. From what you saw this past year with Jim Harbaugh there and obviously all the new players that are there in the front office compared to what Tom Telesco did, obviously for much longer time there in L.A. with the Chargers, how would you kind of compare and contrast the front offices, the GMs, and kind of the decisions that were made moving forward?
Night and day, because I think the Chargers were very aggressive in building and churning the bottom of the roster and not settling and not hey, let's see how things go, or why would we do this? Tom, during his years with the Chargers, was very conservative when it came to, well, why don't you kind of look at this or go out and consider this? There really wasn't that much thought to being aggressive and churning at the bottom of the roster, especially in August. It's like, well, let's see how things develop. No, if you think there's somebody better than what you got that can make the 53, go out and get them. And that was never the mentality here. And I also think the one thing that benefited Tom during his years with the Chargers, he inherited Phillip Rivers, and I mean, I know there were a lot of people in 2020 who was like, well, he picked Justin Herbert. Well, Justin Herbert kind of fell to him at the 6th overall pick. Let's face it, whoever Miami took, if Miami took Justin Herbert, Tom was going to take Tua and the other way around. It wasn't as if, Justin Herbert and Jordan Love were neck and neck, or Jalen Hurts for that matter, and Tom had to select between three quarterbacks. It was whoever was third between Joe Burrow, Tua, and Justin Herbert was going to go to the Chargers at 6 unless a team traded up. So this was the first time in a long time that he had to deal with a quarterback situation. I mean, even going back to Indy, it was Peyton Manning, and then going out and getting Andrew Luck when he was working for Bill Polian. So Tom really didn't have the quarterback quandary or conundrum that he had in Vegas this past year. And I mean, it was kind of an arranged deal too with Antonio Pierce and Tom. And I didn't think from the get-go when Tom was hired that was going to be that was going to be a good combination. And you know, the fact that both were evaluated separately instead of together, I think whoever the new GM head coach combo is, you've got to look at them as a team. And hopefully with Tom Brady having a role in this now in Vegas, hopefully he's kind of impressing that on Mark Davis and the powers that be also making this decision.
So that was Joe Reedy from the AP. I've been rocking with Joe for a very long time, talking all things Chargers. Does a fantastic job, and thought he brought a lot of really good details on who Chad Alexander is as assistant GM. And also, I thought that was some really good nuggets when he's talking about, you know, the front office of the Chargers now that Tom Telesco is gone is a lot more aggressive than they were when Tom Telesco was there. And, you know, I think that's something to kind of get excited about as well, as we know that Tom Telesco did a really good job in the draft. At least I feel like he did a good job in the draft, but he wasn't very aggressive. He didn't move around. He doesn't move around. And, you know, that could be one reason why he's no longer with the team. I think it was just more of the fact that they wanted to have a clean slate and be able to have, you know, whoever comes in as the GM and the head coach kind of, you know, tied in at the hip with each other, but, you know, and align the times all the same. But the aggressiveness and lack of aggressiveness from Tom Telesco could be a thing as well. So I thought that was some really good stuff from Joe Reedy from the AP, talking all things Chad Alexander, a guy that the Raiders are meeting with today. They're also meeting with assistant GM Brandon Brown. He's from the Giants organization. Jordan Rodon from ESPN. I caught up with him last week as well to talk about Brandon Brown. You'll actually hear that coming up on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Again, we'll continue with our Get to Know the Raiders' next potential GM, the little series that we got going here on the show. But coming up next, your calls and texts. What's on your mind? 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raiders podcast voicemail line. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about another great sponsor here on the show, and that is FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets. That's $300 if you win your first bet. $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate. The variety of bets keep every game exciting. And when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs. FanDuel has you covered. I love player prop bets. Those are my favorite, saying what this wide receiver is going to do, or this running back is going to do, or this quarterback is going to do. Those are funny. Those are fun, I should say, to always be able to bet on those and just kind of go see how you feel like the flow of the game is going to go and what that particular player is going to do. That's always a fun and a great way to earn a lot of money. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts. So we have that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Raider Miles in the Mile High. He's calling to make a comment and ask a question about the Raiders as well. Here he is, Raider Miles in the Mile High.
Q, Raider Nation. This is Raider Miles for the Mile High. Just real quick, one thing I can say about Antonio Pierce is he can pick a quarterback. Jaden Daniels is the deal. If Antonio was going after him, and that was clear last year, he could pick that. And then second, Raider. Where did I get this from? Samoan Raider Honcho. What about the Raiders getting Hendon Hooker coming from Detroit, along with the head coach? Since we do need a quarterback, but Hendon Hooker had all the little accolades but just got hurt, so that's why he went a little later, and he's Detroit's backup. So just something to think about, something to chew on. All right, Raider Nation, I'm out. Raiders.
Thank you for the call, my man. And yeah, I mean, that's something I pointed out at the beginning of the show, right? You cannot hold the quarterback position. You can't hold Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury against Antonio Pierce. Obviously, he didn't do enough right to keep his job. That's why he's no longer with the team. But what he did know is that Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury would be a really good 1-2 punch, and that's who he wanted to draft and who he wanted to hire. Obviously, it didn't work out for him, but he was definitely on to something. As far as Hendon Hooker goes, and this is a conversation I've had on my radio show quite a bit. I got my guy, Hardcore Raider, who's a big Hendon Hooker fan, and I thought, well, you know what? If anyone knows Hendon Hooker really well, it would be Ben Johnson. So if he decides that he's going to take the Raiders' job and then wants to bring Hendon Hooker over, then, okay, then he clearly feels like Hendon Hooker could do something. But what stands out to me is on Saturday when the Lions played, Hendon Hooker wasn't active. He was an inactive quarterback. He actually was designated as their emergency quarterback, meaning if Jared Goff went down and Teddy Bridgewater went down, then Hendon Hooker could come into the game. And, well, Jared Goff did go down for a quick minute. Teddy Bridgewater, who, oh, by the way, I know has been in the league and with the Lions before, just signed with the team not too long ago, was their backup quarterback and not Hendon Hooker. So to me, that told me all I really need to know about Hendon Hooker. But again, if Ben Johnson takes the job with the Raiders and says we need to bring Hendon Hooker over and wants to trade for him, then that's got to be some type of positive. And I kind of compared it to when Josh McDaniels took over the Raiders and he traded for Jarrett Stidham. Remember, he traded with the New England Patriots for Jarrett Stidham, and Stidham wasn't the starting quarterback, but he was a backup, and he knew Josh McDaniels' offense, so he was able to help teach it to Derek Carr. So at the very least, maybe Hendon Hooker could be a backup quarterback, but the fact that he wasn't the backup quarterback on Saturday kind of lets me know that he's probably not a starting quarterback in the National Football League, at least not right now, and not in the Lions' eyes, and obviously that's all that matters. But thanks so much for the call. Great to hear from you. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Omar in La Mirada, Cali. He says, good morning, Q. It's Omar from La Mirada, Cali. Food for thought. I know AP is gone and we should move on. However, AP was very vocal about wanting Jaden Daniels as the quarterback, and we even had Cliff Kingsbury lined up to be the OC. Mark Davis then hires Tom Telesco, who the Raiders basically got fired with the blowout victory. Reports are they really never tried to move up for Jaden Daniels. It feels like AP was definitely the fall guy, and if we had gone after JD and Cliff Kingsbury, we could be the team thriving in the postseason instead of Washington. Tom Brady needs to prove himself to Raider Nation. They have set us back another 3 years. Tired of having multiple GMs and head coaches on the payroll. Rumors are Crosby might be in play. That's terrible if it happens. He embodies what it is to be a Raider. We need to get back on track and give the next staff 3 to 4 years. I wish AP would have had a better shot. Thanks for all that you do. Just win, baby. That's from Omar. And thanks for the text. I do appreciate you. And, yeah, as I mentioned with Antonio Pierce, and again, not trying to, continue to pound the tail for Antonio Pierce, whatever. Look, he just didn't win enough games. Bottom line. Production-based business, he didn't produce. He knows that. He said it all the time. We all agree. We all understand. All right, 4 wins. Wasn't going to cut it. The Raiders went in a different direction. But you're right about Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury. I can tell you, I know for a matter of fact, and I know Adam Schefter said that the Raiders never called Washington. I know that they did. I know that they tried to get up to number 2. Matter of fact, they were willing to give up multiple first-round picks to go get Jaden Daniels, but Washington wasn't budging. They absolutely weren't. So I don't know why all of a sudden Adam Schefter wants to start talking about that and bringing that up. That was really what kind of blew my mind, is that he brought that up the other day. But, I mean, it's like the timing is there. I don't know. It's just really weird. So I figured that there's some kind of agenda or some reason why he's talking about that at this stage of the game. But they did definitely try to move up there to go get Jaden Daniels, but Washington was not going to budge. As far as Crosby goes, I don't know what's going to happen with Max. He's let it be known. He brought it up, not me, that he has no money left, no guaranteed money left on his contract. He's not going to sit back and pound the table for anybody to be the head coach like he did with Antonio Pierce. He's just worried about his rehab. But I feel like Max Crosby wants to be kind of told what's going to happen, shown the plan, told, say, hey, this is how we're going to win, because we know that you as an organization, part of the organization, wants to win. And, oh, by the way, this is how much we want to give you as far as guaranteed money. Like, there's a lot in play. And so I think that Max Crosby's put himself in a position where he can, sit down at the table and talk with the powers that be on his next future moves. He very well could be in play, right? I'm not ruling that out at all. And I think that he's not going to rule that out at all either, because, again, at the end of the day, I know he wants to win, and I know he wants guaranteed money, because, well, we all know guaranteed money is what matters the most. So thanks for the text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Frank, the East Coast Raider. He's calling to talk about a game he saw this past weekend and has a few thoughts on it. Here he is, Frank, the East Coast Raider.
AQ, this is Frank. East Coast Raider. Hey, I was just wondering, hopefully this gets some airtime, but if not, that's okay. But I was just wondering, I was watching the Chiefs game, and, it was, interesting game, but I'm thinking, man, doesn't it seem like these referees have been bought, or the NFL is like, I don't know, conspiring to make sure that the Chiefs three-peat or the Chiefs get back into the Super Bowl at least? I don't know. It just seems rather weird that all these calls, that roughing the passer call and among other things, but, all of them bothered me. That one bothered me the most. I was just thinking, what's your thoughts about that? I know this is not a Raider call, but as a Raider fan, it really bothers me to see how, Patrick Mahomes and all of these Chiefs seem to be getting all the calls. And it almost seems like it's rigged. And I hope not to think that way, but, let's call a spade a spade. Those calls were kind of iffy. And I was just curious about your thoughts on that. Take care. Bye for now. Go Raiders. Now we got to get Ben Johnson. Take care.
Thanks so much, Frank, for the call. I appreciate you. And, if you listen to this show for a while, I don't like to talk about officials. I don't like to talk about non-calls, bad calls. I don't like to say that officiating is the reason why, the Raiders lost or they did, whatever the case. Like, I don't subscribe to that because I always feel like there's multiple reasons why, the Raiders lost the game or whatever the case may be. With that being said, you can tell there's a big butt on the way, right? Like Bell Biv DeVoe, can't trust a big butt and a smile, right? You knew that there was a big butt on the way. Watching that Chiefs game and watching those personal foul penalties, those roughing the passer penalties on Patrick Mahomes that weren't even there, the non-hip drop tackle penalty that they didn't call that they should have when Dalton Schultz got tackled. It was clear as day as a hip drop tackle. They didn't call it. It was a bad look. It really was. And again, I never come to the show. I've done over 2,000 shows, and you won't find one where I'm just ripping the officials and saying that they're the reason. But man, that was really bad. It was really bad, and it was so obvious, especially those 15-yard personal fouls on Patrick Mahomes that weren't there, were phantom calls. And then they even had like the head of officiating on NFL Network on Sunday morning saying, oh, well, by the letter of the law, those are actually penalties. Those are penalties. Like, come on, man. Get out of here. And then you see guys like Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. You see these guys getting drilled and hit and pushed out of bounds or tackled out of bounds and nothing. But, man, Patrick Mahomes ducks. Texans run into each other. They drill each other, and there's a penalty. Like, what are you doing, right? Will Anderson gets called for a 15-yard penalty for barely even touching Patrick Mahomes. Like, it reeked of, wow, this looks like some officiating assistance. And I hate to say that. I don't ever want to say that. I know that there's so much money that is in play with these games with different gambling and everything. It would stink to look at something like that and say, yeah, well, that's the reason. And like I said, I've never done that, but man, it really was bad on Saturday. Frank, thanks so much for that call. Definitely appreciate you. Up next, I just got time for a couple more. Got a text from Epic Flagstaff Raider. Says, yo, Q, Epic Flagstaff Raider here up in the north in the 928. Call me crazy, but it's almost seems like Tom Brady is trying to do his best Al Davis with his new role as owner and being an announcer. What I mean by this is he's ruffling a lot of feathers and already making a ton of the league and media upset, which, I don't know, just reminds me of Al for better or worse. So just a funny thought I had. Take care, man. That's Epic Flagstaff Raider. And, yeah, I mean, the thing about it is the Raiders must be doing something right. Tom Brady must be doing something right because there's multiple folks out there, multiple national media members and so many different people talking about the Raiders and, well, this isn't fair. That's not fair. Tom Brady this or Tom Brady that. The Raiders are doing this. It's like, wow, you're really worried about the Raiders. You ain't never been worried about the Raiders. Why would this guy want to go to that division with these different coaches? And he ain't never worried about, who was in the Raiders division before. Nobody got up in arms when Antonio Pierce got hired. Why would AP want that job? He's going to be in the division with Andy Reid and Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh. Or nobody said that when Josh McDaniels got hired. Nobody said that when John Gruden 2.0 came out. Like, nobody said any of that. And now all of a sudden they're up in arms. They're mad because Brady's on the call and he's able to talk to whoever. Look, Brady got on a bird, man, and flew all the way back to Vegas right after he called the games or called the game over the weekend, right? As soon as he did on Saturday night, he got back on that bird, flew back to Vegas. It was part of the GM conversation, the interviews that he had with Lance Newmark from the Commanders. So, yeah, Brady's doing his thing, and it's kind of cool to see, and kind of cool to see a lot of folks mad. That's why on Friday's show, I was like, man, you got the league mad. Like, not just mad, but they're mad at the Raiders right now. So clearly they're doing something to get under some people's skin. So you're spot on, Epic Flagstaff Raider. Thanks for the text. I do appreciate you. We'll close out with a call from Spokane Raider. He's calling to talk about Ben Johnson and what he thinks if he was able to have success in the AFC West. What does that mean for him and really the guy that he is? Here's Spokane Raider.
True Spokane Raider at you. Fan since 1969. Love the show. Keep on keeping on. Say, I've got a take on this thing with Ben Johnson, and my take is this. He would be taking on the Raiders if he decides to do so, and this would be a phenom if it goes all the way. He would be taking on three of the most coveted coaches. The AFC West is the strongest division currently, and if he were able to overcome that in, let's say, 3 years as an example, and put the Raiders in the top of the AFC or at least in the playoffs, that would be monumental. And if he went further from that point, he'd be the second coming of John Madden. In other words, it's a heck of a challenge. I can't think of a bigger challenge in the NFL than taking that on your plate. And if he's given basically free reign to build it the way he wants to build it without much interference and Brady's help, who knows? Hugh, I'd like you to comment on that. Am I just an old man with wishful thinking, or you think that might be somewhat of an incentive for this guy to prove what he really has? Thanks. Love the show.
Thanks so much for the call, my man. I appreciate you, and shout out to you for being a longtime fan of the team. And, yeah, as far as Ben Johnson goes, man, it's a very tall task, right? I mean, we make no bones about it. The AFC West is a tough division, right? When you got Andy Reid, when you have Jim Harbaugh, when you have Sean Payton, even though, two of those three teams aren't playing anymore in the playoffs with the Chargers losing and the Broncos as well. But, yeah, I mean, that's a tall task, but it sounds like he's going to have a long ramp and a runway to build the team in his image. And to me, again, if Ben Johnson is in fact the guy, and again, we don't know until it's signed, sealed, and delivered, it could very much well be like John Gruden 1.0. When John Gruden was hired the first time, he was a hotshot offensive coordinator, wasn't really a big name, huge name at the time, right? Ben Johnson's name is bigger than John Gruden's was at that time, but he's that guy that he was just a sharp offensive mind, and Al Davis hired him, right, and said, hey, this could be the next great coach. And I think Gruden had an opportunity to be the next great coach, right? Obviously, we all know how it played out with Al Davis trading him, but he really could have ended up being that guy. Ben Johnson might be Mark Davis's John Gruden for all we know, right? That could be the hire that puts Mark Davis on the map, because all his hires that he's had so far, including John Gruden 2.0, have not worked out. So maybe this is going to be the hire this time, and to have that guy that's as creative as he is. And if you heard Tom Brady on the call Saturday night of the Lions game and heard some of the excitement that he had when he saw different play calls from Ben Johnson, you could tell that they're definitely putting that full court press on him moving forward. But Spokane Raider, thanks so much for that call, my man. Definitely appreciate you. And we'll see how it all plays out. But the good thing, Raider Nation, is that I feel like it's going to play out this week. We're going to find out who the Raiders' next GM is going to be. We'll find out who the Raiders' next head football coach is going to be. And I do believe it's going to happen this week. I think Ben Johnson is a leader in the clubhouse. I definitely think he's going to be the guy they put the full court press on. And if he doesn't take the job, I would not be shocked at all to hear by the end of the week that Pete Carroll is named the Raiders' next head coach. Just saying, just throwing it out there on a Monday. So that's going to do it for today's show, Raider Nation. Definitely appreciate you as always. Happy MLK Day. Whatever you're choosing to do, maybe you have the day off work. I don't have any radio shows today, so I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't want to say it too loud because then I might have some chores to do around the house, if you know what I mean. So I don't want that to happen. But, I don't know what to do with no radio shows today. But, of course, want to make sure the podcast is here for you. So if you are off work and you get a little R&R, a little rest and relaxation, you can go ahead and enjoy that. Maybe spend some time with the fam. Or if you are working, well, then you're working and you do what you do. But enjoy the day no matter what. Again, happy MLK Day. And, again, shout out to my oldest son, Kimani, who passed away on January 20th back in 2020. So we'll shout out and we'll dedicate this show to Kimani as we do every single January 20th, and we shout him out on his birthday as well, September 19th. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, we'll get back to your calls and texts. Like I said, you'll hear about Brandon Brandon Brown, the assistant GM for the Giants, who the Raiders are talking to today. Jordan Ronan from ESPN will give you a breakdown of what Brandon Brown brings to the table and who he is just as a talent evaluator. You'll hear that, and, of course, news and notes, and we'll see what the Raiders have done. They're going to be very busy and very active on today, and so we'll keep our head on a swivel as we always do. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.